Why was everyone staring at her like she didn't belong? May Carter stood in the entrance of Hangar 3, holding a tool bag that had seen better days. The leather was patched with duct tape. Her boots were scuffed. Her civilian clothes, faded jeans and a gray t-shirt, made her invisible in a sea of camouflage and precision. She was 49 years old. Her hair had gone gray. Her hands trembled slightly when she held them still. And everyone wondered why Master Sergeant Harrison had called her. The emergency lights painted everything red. The Apache helicopter sat dead in the center of the hangar, its engine bay open like a wound. 20 engineers and pilots stood around it, frustrated, exhausted. They'd been working for 6 hours. Nothing had worked. Staff Sergeant Kyle Mason saw her first. He was 26, confident. 6 years of Apache experience made him the expert everyone turned to. "Ma'am," he called out, walking toward her, "this is a restricted area." May didn't answer right away. Instead, she did something subtle, something only a few people in that hangar would recognize. She checked the corners. Her eyes scanned for exits, for threats. The movement was instinctive, unconscious, the kind of habit that stays with you long after you leave combat zones. Sergeant Park, the Apache crew chief, noticed. His eyes narrowed. Who was this woman? "I'm here to look at your engine problem," May said quietly. Kyle's laugh was harsh, dismissive. "Lady, this is an A-64 Apache attack helicopter. You need years of specialized training just to touch these systems. Top secret clearance. Whatever maintenance experience you have with civilian helicopters isn't going to help here." May opened her tool bag. Her movements were deliberate, precise. She checked each compartment in a specific sequence. Park moved closer, his curiosity growing. "Ma'am," Staff Sergeant Wright interrupted. He was a by-the-book NCO, every regulation memorized, every protocol followed. "I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the aircraft. Only certified Apache technicians are authorized to work on these systems." May ignored him. She walked toward the helicopter. Kyle noticed her bootlaces. They were tied using a rigger's knot, the kind taught to airborne personnel, not the standard civilian bow most people used. Something wasn't adding up. "Did Master Sergeant Harrison send you?" Park asked. May nodded. "He said you had an engine that wouldn't start." Kyle positioned himself between May and the helicopter. "I don't care who sent you. You're not touching this bird. We've already got our best people working the problem." "Your best people missed something," May said quietly. The comment hit Kyle like a slap. "Missed something?" "Lady, I've been working on Apache engines for 6 years. I know every bolt, every wire, every sensor in this machine. We've followed every diagnostic protocol Boeing ever wrote." May pulled a small flashlight from her tool bag. Park noticed how she held it. Before turning it on, she performed what looked like a brass check, the unconscious habit of checking a weapons chamber, the kind of movement that soldiers carried with them forever. "Mind if I take a look?" May asked. "Absolutely not," Kyle snapped. "You don't have clearance, you don't have certification, and you sure as hell don't have the experience to work on a $40 million weapons system." May stepped around Kyle with fluid movement, the kind of movement experienced soldiers used in confined spaces. She approached the engine bay and immediately spotted something. "You opened the engine cowling wrong," she said. Kyle's face flushed red. "What did you just say?" "The safety protocol. You're supposed to disconnect the battery before removing the cowling. There's still residual power in the system." "I've been doing this for 6 years, Kyle protested. "I know the safety protocols." May pointed to a small, yellow indicator light glowing inside the engine compartment. "That light means the system is still armed. You could have shorted out the entire electrical system." Park walked over, looked where May was pointing. The indicator light was indeed still on. Kyle's team had missed it in their rush to fix the problem. She's right, Park muttered. The system's still hot. Kyle stared at the light. His confidence wavered for the first time. That's just a minor oversight. Doesn't change the fact that the oxygen sensors are completely dead. But there was something else May had noticed, something that made her pause. She pulled on a pair of work gloves. Her hands, despite their slight tremor, moved with surprising precision as she traced the sensor wiring. "These aren't just dead," she said after a moment. "These are counterfeit." The hangar went silent. "What?" Kyle stepped forward. "That's impossible. All our parts come from Boeing-certified suppliers." May pulled out a small magnifying glass and examined the sensor casing. "Look at the serial number. The font is wrong, the spacing is off, and the metal composition." She scratched the surface lightly with a tool. "This isn't aerospace-grade aluminum, it's a cheap substitute." Wright moved closer, his skepticism visible. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you can't determine metal composition just by looking at it." "You're right," May said, "but I can determine it by weight, texture, and thermal conductivity." She touched the sensor casing with her bare hand. "This metal conducts heat differently than genuine Boeing parts. It's heavier, denser, and the finish work is sloppy." Park pulled out his maintenance manual and compared the genuine part specifications with the installed sensor. His expression changed from skepticism to concern. "She might be onto something," he said. "These sensors do look different from the ones in the manual." Kyle wasn't ready to admit defeat. "Even if you're right about the parts being counterfeit, which I'm not saying you are, it doesn't change the fact that we need factory-certified replacements. Those won't be here for 72 hours. May was already reaching into her tool bag. "Or," she said quietly, "we could bypass the oxygen sensor system entirely and run the engine on manual fuel mixture control." Wright's eyes went wide. "That's not in any authorized maintenance procedure." "No," May agreed, "it's not." "Then we can't do it," Wright said firmly. "Regulations specifically prohibit unauthorized modifications to Apache systems." May looked at him for a long moment. There was something in her eyes, something old, something that had seen things most people only read about. "Sergeant Wright," she said softly, 3 hours ago Captain Martinez's Apache went down 15 kilometers from here. He's wounded, bleeding internally. The sandstorm makes ground rescue impossible. The only way to reach him is by air. And this," she gestured to the dead helicopter, "this is the only bird that can make that flight." Wright's jaw tightened. "I understand the situation, ma'am, but regulations exist for a reason." "They do," May said. "Regulations keep people safe. They maintain standards. They protect lives. But sometimes," she paused, "sometimes the regulation becomes more important than the life it was designed to protect." Kyle was watching May carefully now. The dismissive arrogance had faded from his expression. "Even if we wanted to bypass the sensor system, which we don't, how would you even do it? The engine management computer won't run without sensor input." May pulled a small device from her tool bag. It looked homemade, crude, definitely not Boeing certified. "This is a sensor emulator," she explained. "It sends false signals to the engine computer, making it think the oxygen sensors are working normally. Meanwhile, you control the fuel mixture manually using the backup throttle controls." "That's insane," Kyle said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "It's also how we kept helicopters flying in Afghanistan when supply lines were cut and replacement parts took weeks to arrive," May said quietly. The hangar went silent again. Park was the first to speak. "You served." May didn't answer directly. Instead, she turned back to the engine bay. "Captain Martinez has less than 2 hours. Are we going to save him, or are we going to let him die while we debate regulations?" Major Stevens had been watching from the operations center entrance. He'd arrived 5 minutes earlier, drawn by reports of a civilian woman arguing with his maintenance crew. Now he stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I'm Major Stevens, base commander. Before we proceed, I need to know who you are and what qualifications you have." May turned to face him. For a moment she looked tired, old, like the weight of years had finally caught up to her. "My name is May Carter," she said. 15 years ago, I was Chief Warrant Officer Carter, lead pilot and chief mechanic for Black Widow Squadron. We specialized in emergency repairs under combat conditions." Stephen's expression changed. Recognition and something else. Respect. "Black Widow Squadron," he said slowly. "That was the unit that was eliminated during a classified operation in Afghanistan," May finished. "Yes, sir." Kyle looked between May and Stevens, confusion evident on his face. "If Black Widow Squadron was eliminated, how are you here?" May's hands began trembling more noticeably. She clasped them together to steady them. "Because I'm the widow," she said quietly, "the only one who made it out." The silence that followed was different, heavier. Everyone in that hangar suddenly understood they weren't dealing with an incompetent civilian contractor. They were standing in the presence of someone who had survived something unspeakable. Stevens made his decision. "Chief Carter, you have my authorization to proceed with the repair. Use whatever methods you deem necessary." Wright opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. Some situations transcended regulations. May turned back to the Apache. "I'll need 2 people who can follow instructions without questioning them. We have 90 minutes. Park stepped forward immediately. "I'm with you, Chief." Kyle hesitated. His pride warred with his duty. Finally, duty won. "What do you need me to do?" What May did next would either save a life or destroy a $40 million helicopter. And everyone watching knew that the real test wasn't her technical skill. It was whether they could trust someone who had been dismissed, underestimated, and forgotten. Sometimes the hardest part of being competent is convincing others to let you prove it. Why did her hands shake when she held the wrench, but steady when she touched the engine? May Carter worked with a rhythm that seemed to come from somewhere deep. Muscle memory, years of training, the kind of precision that doesn't fade even when everything else does. Kyle handed her tools as she called for them. Park monitored the engine diagnostics. Wright documented every step, his regulation-focused mind unable to simply watch without recording. "Removing the primary oxygen sensor," May said, her voice calm, professional. "Park, disconnect the power feed to the engine management computer." "Copy," Park responded, his hands moving to the correct panel. Kyle watched May's technique, the way she positioned her body, the angle of her approach, the careful, deliberate movements that protected both the equipment and herself. She worked like someone who had done this 1,000 times, in the dark, under fire, when failure meant death. "The counterfeit sensors are out," May said 15 minutes later, "installing the emulator now." She connected the homemade device to the engine computer. Her trembling fingers threaded wires through connection points that Kyle would have sworn were too small to access without specialized tools. "How long have you been doing this?" Kyle asked quietly. May didn't look up from her work. "Started training when I was 19. Flew my first combat mission at 23. By 25, I could repair an Apache blindfolded in a sandstorm." "And now?" Kyle asked. May's hands paused for just a moment. "Now I'm 49. My hands shake. My eyes need reading glasses. And most people assume I belong in a retirement home, not a maintenance hangar." There was no bitterness in her voice, just statement of fact. "I'm sorry," Kyle said, and he meant it. "I shouldn't have assumed." "You assumed what most people assume," May interrupted. "That age means incompetence, that a trembling hand can't be steady when it matters, that a woman in civilian clothes couldn't possibly understand military systems." She looked up at him. "You weren't cruel, Sergeant Mason. You were just wrong." The distinction mattered. Kyle nodded slowly. What happened to your squadron? May's expression closed off. That's a long story, and we don't have time for long stories. She returned to the repair. Her fingers moved through the engine bay with practiced ease, reconnecting systems, bypassing failed components, creating workarounds that wouldn't be found in any manual. Wright watched with growing discomfort. Every modification May made violated some regulation or protocol, but he couldn't deny the results. The engine was coming back to life. Emulator installed, May announced. Park, restore power to the engine computer. Park flipped the switch. The engine management system powered up. Status lights began flickering across the control panel. It's accepting the emulator signal, Park said, surprise evident in his voice. The computer thinks the oxygen sensors are functional. May move to the backup throttle controls. This is where it gets tricky. The engine will start, but the fuel mixture needs to be controlled manually. Too rich and we flood the engine. Too lean and we risk combustion failure. How do you know the correct mixture? Kyle asked. I don't, May admitted. Not exactly, but I can feel it. Wright looked skeptical. You can feel it. May placed her hand on the engine casing. Metal expands with heat. Vibration patterns change with fuel flow. Air density affects compression ratios. You learn to read the engine, to understand what it's telling you. She was talking about something that couldn't be taught from a manual. Instinct, experience, the kind of knowledge that only came from years of intimate familiarity with machines that could either save your life or kill you. Beginning engine start sequence, May said. She adjusted the backup throttle with one hand while monitoring the fuel flow gauge with the other. Her trembling fingers moved with surprising delicacy. The engine coughed. Everyone in the hangar held their breath. May made a micro-adjustment to the fuel mixture. The engine coughed again, then caught. The rotor blades began to turn. Slowly at first, then faster. The sound was beautiful, a mechanical thunder that meant life, hope, a chance to save Captain Martinez. But something was wrong. May's expression tightened. The fuel mixture is unstable. The engine's running, but it won't hold for long. What do we do? Park asked. May closed her eyes, listening, feeling, reading the engine through vibrations that traveled through the airframe and into her bones. There's an harmonic resonance in the fuel pump, she said. The counterfeit sensors damaged the pump calibration. We need to retune it. Kyle checked his watch. We have 45 minutes before Captain Martinez's window closes. May opened her eyes, made a decision. Park, get me a flight suit. I'm going with the rescue team. Stevens had been monitoring from the operations center. His voice came through on the hangar intercom. Chief Carter, are you saying this engine needs constant manual adjustment during flight? Yes, sir, May confirmed. The automated systems are compromised. Someone needs to ride in the crew bay and adjust the fuel mixture manually throughout the mission. That's a combat flight into hostile territory, Stevens said. You're a civilian contractor. May pulled off her work gloves. Her hands were still trembling, but her voice was steady. Sir, I haven't been a civilian contractor for the last 90 minutes. I've been doing the job I was trained to do. The job I did for 11 years before Black Widow Squadron was eliminated. And right now, Captain Martinez needs someone who can keep this engine running until we get him home. Stevens was quiet for a long moment. Park, get Chief Carter a flight suit, he finally said, and someone brief her on current tactical situation. Kyle watched May with new understanding. You're going back up. I never really came down, May said quietly. I've been on the ground for 15 years, but I've never stopped flying, not where it counts. She pointed to her head, then her heart. The Apache rotor blades spun faster. The engine held steady, and May Carter prepared to do something she hadn't done since the day her squadron died. She prepared to fly into a sandstorm, to save a soldier's life. Wright approached her carefully. "Chief Carter, I owe you an apology." "You were doing your job, Sergeant Wright," May said. "Following regulations, maintaining standards, we need people like you." "But sometimes we need people who know when to break the rules," Wright finished. May smiled. It was small, sad, the smile of someone who had paid a terrible price for knowing that sometimes rules had to be broken. "Not break them," she corrected gently. "Understand them, know why they exist, and recognize the moment when following them perfectly would betray their purpose." Park handed her a flight suit. She disappeared into the changing room. Kyle stood by the Apache, his hand on the engine cowling. The metal was warm now, alive, purring with barely controlled power. "I thought I knew everything about these engines," he said to Park. "You know the manual," Park replied. "She knows the machine, there's a difference." Wright was documenting the repair procedure in his maintenance log. His hands moved mechanically, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. "I spent 6 years learning to follow every protocol perfectly," he said. "I thought that's what made someone a good soldier." "It does," Park said, "but being a great soldier, that requires something else, something you can't learn from regulations." "What's that?" Wright asked. Park watched the changing room door. "The courage to be wrong, the humility to learn, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the person who looks least capable is exactly who you need." May emerged in the flight suit. It was too big for her. The sleeves had to be rolled up, but she wore it with the same quiet dignity she'd worn her civilian clothes. She moved toward the Apache. Kyle noticed something. "Chief Carter, you're limping." May didn't break stride. "Old injury doesn't affect my work." But Kyle saw the way she favored her left leg, the careful weight distribution, the slight grimace she tried to hide. "What happened?" he asked. May paused at the Apache's crew door. "The day Black Widow Squadron was eliminated, I didn't just lose my squad mates. I lost part of my leg below the knee, shrapnel from an RPG." Kyle stared. "You've been working on this engine with a prosthetic leg." "Does it matter?" May asked. "No," Kyle said. "I guess it doesn't. I didn't notice." "Most people don't," May said. "They see the gray hair, the trembling hands, the civilian clothes. They see what they expect to see, but they miss what's actually there." She climbed into the Apache's crew bay. Her movements were practiced despite the years away. She positioned herself near the engine access panel where she could make adjustments during flight. Major Stevens appeared in the hangar. "Chief Carter, this is Lieutenant Chen. She'll be piloting the rescue mission." A young woman in full flight gear approached. She was maybe 28, sharp eyes, confident bearing, the kind of pilot who had logged hundreds of combat hours. "Chief Carter," Chen said, offering her hand. "I've heard the stories about Black Widow Squadron. It's an honor." May took her hand, held it firm. "The honor is mine, Lieutenant. I'm trusting you with my life, and with Captain Martinez's life. That's not something I do lightly." Chen nodded. "We'll bring him home." "I know you will," May said. "Because you have to, because that's what we do. We don't leave people behind." Stevens gave the final briefing. "The sandstorm is intensifying. Visibility will be near zero. Enemy activity has increased in the area around Landing Zone Charlie. This is going to be dangerous." "It always is," May said quietly. The Apache lifted off 18 minutes later. The engine roared. The rotors bit into the desert air, and May Carter flew back into the kind of chaos she thought she'd left behind 15 years ago. Inside the crew bay, her hands moved constantly, adjusting the fuel mixture, monitoring the engine temperature, reading vibrations that told her stories about metal fatigue, stress points, and operational limits. Her hands weren't trembling anymore. They were steady, sure, doing what they'd been trained to do. Lieutenant Chen's voice came through the intercom. "Chief Carter, how's the engine holding?" "Stable for now," May replied. But the fuel pump harmonic is getting worse. We have maybe 40 minutes of flight time before it fails completely. That's enough time to reach Captain Martinez and get back, Chen said. Barely. The Apache flew into the sandstorm. Visibility dropped to nothing. The world became a brown haze of swirling dust and howling wind. May worked by touch and sound. Her instruments were unreliable in the storm, but her hands knew the engine. Her ears heard the subtle changes in pitch that indicated stress. Her instincts guided her through adjustments that kept them in the air. 5 minutes to landing zone Charlie, Chen announced. Then enemy fire erupted from below. What came next would test whether survival was about luck, skill, or something else entirely. Had she survived 15 years ago because she was the best pilot, or because she was the one who was supposed to survive? The tracer rounds cut through the sandstorm like angry fireflies. May felt the Apache shudder as rounds impacted the armored fuselage. The sound was distinctive, sharp, metal on metal. Taking fire from multiple positions, Chen reported, her voice calm despite the chaos. Ground forces are more entrenched than intelligence suggested. May's hands never stopped moving. She adjusted the fuel mixture to compensate for the sudden changes in power demand as Chen maneuvered the helicopter through evasive patterns. Engines holding, May called out. But every hard maneuver stresses the fuel pump. We can't sustain this for long. Copy that, Chen replied. Weapons hot, engaging targets. The Apache's cannon roared. May felt the vibration through the entire airframe. Her hands automatically compensated for the engine stress caused by weapons fire. This was what Black Widow Squadron had trained for: combat repairs during active engagement, keeping machines alive when everything around them was trying to kill them. Target neutralized, Chen said. Landing zone Charlie in sight, putting us down. The Apache descended through the storm. May could see nothing from her position in the crew bay. She worked blind, trusting Chen's flying, trusting the engine to hold together for just a few more minutes. The landing was rough. Sand blasted against the hull. The engine temperature spiked as they touched down. Martinez's position is 50 meters northeast, Chen said. Ground team is moving to extract him. May monitored the engine. The fuel pump harmonic was getting worse. The vibration had spread to the main rotor assembly. They had minutes, not hours. Chen, May said carefully, when we take off with Martinez's extra weight, the engine is going to be pushed to its limit. The fuel pump might not make it. What are our options? Chen asked. May looked at the engine access panel, at her trembling hands, at the tools she'd brought. I can try to adjust the pump calibration during takeoff, she said, but it means I won't be able to control the fuel mixture. You'll have to fly smooth. No hard maneuvers, even if we take fire. That's suicide, Chen said flatly. It's math, May corrected. The pump calibration is fixable. Getting shot down because I'm trying to adjust two systems at once isn't. So I fix one problem completely and you handle the other. By not getting shot, Chen said. By not getting shot, May confirmed. The ground team reached the Apache 60 seconds later. Captain Martinez was unconscious. Blood soaked through his flight suit. The medic with him looked grim. He's stable for now, the medic said, but we need to move fast. They loaded Martinez into the Apache. May worked around them, her hands already accessing the engine compartment. The fuel pump was accessible from inside the crew bay, but barely. She had to contort her body into an awkward position, her prosthetic leg creating angles that made the work even harder. 30 seconds to takeoff, Chen announced. May's fingers found the pump calibration screws. They were designed to be adjusted on the ground with specialized tools. She was doing it with a standard wrench while the engine was running. Engaging rotors, Chen said. The Apache lifted off. May twisted the calibration screw a quarter turn. Too much, and the pump would fail immediately. Too little, and the harmonic would tear it apart during flight. Enemy fire erupted again. "Contact left," Chen called. "Multiple hostiles." May heard the rounds impacting, felt the Apache shift as Chen tried to maneuver. But she held the stick steady, giving May the smooth flight she'd asked for. "Good flying," May said quietly, still working on the pump. "Not getting shot," Chen replied, and May could hear the fear hidden beneath the professional tone. May made another micro-adjustment. The harmonic began to dampen, the vibration decreased. The pump was responding. But they weren't clear yet. "Sam, launch," Chen said, her voice tight. "We have a missile inbound." May's blood went cold. A surface-to-air missile meant Chen would have to maneuver hard, very hard, and that meant the engine would be stressed beyond what May could compensate for. "How long until impact?" May asked. 15 seconds, Chen replied. May made a decision that went against every survival instinct she had. "Chen, don't deploy countermeasures yet. Give me 10 seconds. Chief, that missile will kill us." "The fuel pump will kill us faster if I don't finish this adjustment," May said. 10 seconds. Then you do whatever you need to do." The missile screamed toward them through the sandstorm. May's hands moved with desperate precision. One more adjustment, one more quarter turn. 5 seconds, Chen said. May felt the fuel pump lock into alignment. The harmonic disappeared. The vibration smoothed out. "Do it," May said. Chen deployed countermeasures and threw the Apache into a violent evasive maneuver. May was slammed against the crew bay wall. Her tools went flying. Martinez's unconscious body strained against the restraints. The missile detonated behind them. The blast wave hit the Apache like a giant fist. Metal screamed. Alarms blared, but the engine held. "We're clear," Chen said, breathing hard. "Engine status." May pulled herself upright, checked her instruments. "Stable, the fuel pump is holding, we can make it back." The flight back to Fob Thunder took 23 minutes. 23 minutes of flying through a sandstorm with a damaged helicopter, a critically wounded soldier, and an engine that shouldn't have been running at all. May kept her hands on the engine controls, monitoring, adjusting, feeling every vibration, every temperature change, every subtle shift that indicated stress. She thought about Black Widow Squadron, about the day they'd been ambushed, about how she'd been the only one to make it out. People had asked her over the years why she survived, what made her different, what made her special. She'd never had a good answer. Maybe she wasn't special. Maybe she'd just been stubborn, too stubborn to die, too stubborn to quit, too stubborn to accept that being the last one left meant she didn't matter anymore. "Fob Thunder in sight," Chen announced. The base materialized through the sandstorm. The hangar lights were beacons cutting through the brown haze. May could see people gathering, waiting. "Bringing us in," Chen said. The Apache touched down gently. The engine continued to run smoothly. May made one final adjustment to the fuel mixture, then powered down the backup throttle controls. "Engine shutdown complete," she said. Medical teams rushed forward. They extracted Martinez from the crew bay with practiced efficiency. The medic who'd accompanied them on the rescue gave a thumbs up. Martinez would live. May climbed out of the Apache slowly. Her body ached. Her prosthetic leg had taken a beating during the hard maneuver, but she was alive. Kyle was waiting at the hangar entrance. "Chief Carter, that was incredible." May shook her head. "That was necessary, there's a difference." Park approached with a serious expression. "Chief, Major Stevens needs to see you in the operations center, right now." May's instincts told her something was wrong. The tone, the urgency, the way Park wouldn't meet her eyes. "What's going on?" she asked. "It's about the counterfeit parts," Park said quietly. "When we removed the sensors from your repair, Wright ran a full analysis. Chief, those weren't just counterfeit, they were deliberately sabotaged." May felt ice in her stomach. Sabotaged. The sensors were designed to fail, Park continued. Someone wanted that Apache grounded, and given the timing, he glanced toward the operations center. Major Stevens has questions, a lot of questions. May followed Park across the tarmac. Her mind was racing. Counterfeit parts were bad enough, but deliberately sabotaged components meant something worse, much worse. It meant someone didn't want Fob Thunder's Apache flying. And the question that terrified her was simple: why? The operations center was crowded when May entered. Major Stevens stood at the center, flanked by intelligence officers she didn't recognize. Master Sergeant Harrison was there too, his weathered face grim. "Chief Carter," Stevens said, "thank you for coming. I need you to tell me everything you know about counterfeit military parts." May looked around the room, at the faces watching her, at the tension crackling through the air. "How much time do we have?" she asked. Stevens' answer chilled her to the bone. "About 3 hours. That's when the next supply convoy arrives with replacement parts for the entire Apache fleet. Parts that we now suspect are all counterfeit, all sabotaged, and if we install them—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Every Apache at Fob Thunder would be grounded. Every pilot would be vulnerable. Every mission would be compromised. And somewhere out there, someone was counting on exactly that. May Carter had come to this base thinking she would fix one engine. Instead, she'd stumbled into something much bigger. Something that reached back 15 years to the day Black Widow Squadron was eliminated. Because the truth about counterfeit parts wasn't about money or corners being cut. It was about war, about betrayal, about people who had decided that some soldiers were expendable if it served a greater purpose. And May had just proven that she wasn't one of them. Sometimes being underestimated isn't an insult. It's camouflage. And when you're the last survivor of a squadron that was eliminated for knowing too much, camouflage is the only thing keeping you alive. What did the supply convoy have to do with what happened 15 years ago? May stood in the operations center, staring at photographs spread across the tactical table. Each image showed counterfeit Apache parts, sensors, pumps, control modules, all manufactured with subtle differences that made them look genuine but function fatally. "These aren't random counterfeits," May said, examining the photos. "This is systematic, organized. Someone with deep knowledge of Apache systems deliberately designed these to fail at specific intervals." One of the intelligence officers, Captain Brooks, leaned forward. "How can you be certain?" May pointed to a sensor housing in one of the photos. "Look at the failure pattern. The metal composition is wrong, yes, but it's wrong in a very specific way. This alloy will handle normal flight operations for about 200 hours. Then it will fail catastrophically. No warning, no gradual degradation, just sudden, complete failure." 200 hours, Stevens repeated slowly. "That's approximately how long most deployed helicopters operate before major maintenance cycles." "Exactly," May said. "Someone wanted these parts to fail in the field, during missions, when replacement would be difficult or impossible, when pilots would be at maximum risk." Master Sergeant Harrison had been quiet until now. He'd called May to the base. He'd known she would recognize something others had missed. Now he spoke carefully. "Chief Carter, 15 years ago, Black Widow Squadron was investigating supply chain irregularities in Afghanistan. Specifically, they were tracking counterfeit parts entering the military supply system." May's hands began trembling again, not from palsy, from memory. "We documented 17 separate instances of counterfeit components," she said quietly. "Helicopter parts, vehicle parts, communications equipment. We traced the supply chain back to 3 main distribution centers, and we found something that terrified us." "What did you find?" Brooks asked. May looked at Stevens, at Harrison, at the faces around the tactical table. We found that the counterfeit parts weren't just entering the supply chain by accident, she said. They were being inserted deliberately, by people with access, by people with authority, by people who knew exactly what they were doing. The operations center went silent. "You're saying this was an inside operation?" Stevens asked. "We suspected it," May said. "We couldn't prove it, not definitively, but we had evidence. Names, transaction records, shipping manifests, everything we needed to expose the entire network." "What happened to that evidence?" Brooks asked. May's voice went flat, empty. "It was destroyed when Black Widow Squadron's forward base was attacked, along with everyone who knew about the investigation." Stevens exchanged glances with Harrison. "Everyone except you." "Everyone except me," May confirmed. She moved around the tactical table, studying the layout of the base, the locations of the Apache fleet, the timing of the incoming supply convoy. "This convoy," she said, "the one arriving in 3 hours, where did the parts originate?" Brooks consulted his tablet. "Multiple suppliers, all Boeing certified, all vetted through standard procurement channels." "Can you trace them back further?" May asked. "To the original manufacturing facilities?" Brooks' fingers moved across his tablet. His expression changed. "This is strange. The parts originated from 3 different distribution centers, all located in—" "Let me guess," May interrupted. "The same 3 distribution centers Black Widow Squadron identified 15 years ago." Brooks looked up stunned. "How did you know?" May didn't answer directly. Instead, she turned to Stevens. "Sir, that convoy needs to be stopped. Every part needs to be inspected, and everyone involved in the procurement chain needs to be questioned." "On what authority?" Wright asked. He'd entered the operations center during the briefing. "Chief Carter, you're a civilian contractor. You can't just accuse military procurement officers of sabotage." "She's not accusing them," Harrison said. "She's recognizing a pattern, one that got her entire squadron killed." The weight of that statement hung in the air. Kyle had followed Wright into the operations center. He'd been listening from the doorway. Now he stepped forward. "Chief, when you were repairing the Apache, you said these counterfeit sensors were heavier than genuine parts, that they conducted heat differently. How did you know that?" May met his eyes. "Because I've seen them before, in Afghanistan, right before my squadron was eliminated." The pieces were falling into place, but there were still gaps, questions that needed answers. Stevens made a decision. "Brooks, contact division headquarters. I want that supply convoy stopped and every part impounded for inspection. Harrison, pull all maintenance records for our Apache fleet. I want to know how many of these counterfeit parts are already installed." "Sir," Wright said carefully, "if we ground the Apache fleet based on suspicion, we'll be vulnerable. We won't have air support capability." "If we fly Apache with sabotaged parts," Stevens countered, "we'll have dead pilots. That's not a trade I'm willing to make." May appreciated Stevens' decisiveness, but there was something he wasn't seeing, something that made her blood run cold. "Major," she said quietly, "there's another possibility." "What's that?" Stevens asked. "What if grounding the Apache fleet is exactly what someone wants us to do?" The operations center went silent again. Everyone understood the implication. "You're suggesting this is a tactical move," Brooks said. "Create a crisis that forces us to ground our air assets." "It would leave the base vulnerable," May said. "No air support means ground operations become exponentially more dangerous. Supply convoys, medical evacuations, quick reaction forces, everything becomes harder without air coverage." Stevens looked at the tactical map, at the positions of enemy forces in the region, at the supply routes that depended on air support. "If someone wanted to attack this base," he said slowly, "this would be the perfect time to do it." "Or if someone wanted to send a message," May added, "a demonstration of reach, of power, of the ability to compromise American military readiness from the inside. Harrison moved to a secure terminal and began pulling up classified intelligence reports. His face grew darker as he read. "Chief Carter," he said after a moment, "3 other bases in this theater have reported similar issues with Apache components in the last 6 months. Each time, the parts traced back to the same distribution centers. Each time, the investigations were closed due to insufficient evidence." "How many pilots died?" May asked. Harrison's silence was answer enough. May felt 15 years of grief and anger crystallize into cold, hard determination. Black Widow's squadron hadn't been eliminated because of a random attack. They'd been targeted, silenced, murdered, because they'd gotten too close to exposing a supply chain corruption scheme that was still operating today. "We need to contact whoever is in charge of this convoy," May said. "Not just stop it. We need to find out who authorized these parts, who certified them, who signed off on procurement." "That's going to lead to some very uncomfortable questions," Stevens said. "Questions that reach pretty high up the chain of command." "Good," May said, "because whoever is behind this has been operating with impunity for 15 years. They've killed soldiers. They've compromised readiness. They've betrayed everything we're supposed to stand for. And they've done it while hiding behind regulations, certifications, and official approval." She looked around the operations center at the soldiers who had doubted her just hours earlier. Kyle, Wright, Park, Chen, all of them were listening now. All of them understood they were witnessing something bigger than a simple maintenance issue. 15 years ago, May said, Black Widow's squadron found evidence of corruption. We were eliminated before we could act on it, but we documented everything. We took photographs. We made copies. We protected our evidence. "Where is that evidence now?" Brooks asked. May reached into her tool bag, the same worn, duct-taped bag she'd carried into the hangar. She pulled out a small metal case. Old, dented, but secure. "Black Widow Squadron protocols," she explained. "When conducting sensitive investigations, we each carried redundant copies of all evidence, encrypted, protected, designed to survive even if we didn't." She opened the case. Inside was a thumb drive wrapped in protective material. "This is everything we found," May said. "Names, dates, transaction records, shipping manifests, financial transfers, all of it. I've been carrying it for 15 years, waiting for the right moment, waiting for enough proof to make the accusation stick." Stevens looked at the thumb drive like it was a live grenade. "Chief Carter, if what you're saying is true, this evidence could implicate dozens of people, maybe hundreds, across multiple branches of the military." "Yes, sir," May said, "it could." "It could also end careers," Wright pointed out. "Destroy reputations. Some of the people involved might have had legitimate reasons for their actions, might have been following orders, might have been deceived themselves." May's expression was carved from stone. "Then we sort out the innocent from the guilty, but we do it in the light, not in the shadows where corruption thrives." Kyle stepped forward. "Chief, why didn't you come forward with this evidence 15 years ago, right after Black Widow's squadron was eliminated?" May's answer was simple and devastating. "Because I tried, and the people I reported to told me the investigation was closed, that Black Widow squadron's findings were classified, that bringing up old accusations would dishonor the memory of my dead squadmates. And then," she paused, "then someone tried to kill me. A car accident that wasn't an accident, a house fire that wasn't an accident. After the 3rd attempt, I understood. The corruption went deeper than we'd realized, so I disappeared. Became a civilian contractor, kept my head down, and waited." "Waited for what?" Stevens asked. "For this," May said, gesturing to the tactical table, to the counterfeit parts, to the base that was now facing the same threat that had destroyed her squadron. "For proof that the corruption wasn't just historical, that it was ongoing, that people were still dying because of it." She placed the thumb drive on the tactical table. Captain Martinez almost died today because of counterfeit parts in his Apache, May said. How many more soldiers have to die before we stop pretending this isn't happening? No one had an answer. Stevens picked up the thumb drive, looked at it, then looked at May. Chief Carter, he said formally, on my authority as base commander, I'm requesting that you provide full cooperation with a formal investigation into supply chain corruption. Your testimony and evidence will be crucial. Understood, sir, May replied. And Chief, Stevens added, I'm sorry for what happened to Black Widow Squadron, for what you've carried for 15 years, for what we failed to see. May nodded once, sharp, military, the kind of acknowledgement that meant more than words. But there was still a problem. The supply convoy was arriving in less than 3 hours. The Apache fleet was potentially compromised. And somewhere out there, people who had gotten away with murder for 15 years were about to discover that the widow they'd failed to kill was still very much alive. And she wasn't hiding anymore. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with sirens and badges. Sometimes it arrives with trembling hands, gray hair, and a tool bag full of evidence that people spent 15 years trying to bury. How many enemies can hide behind the word authorized? The secure conference room filled quickly. Stevens had summoned every senior officer on base. Lieutenant Colonel Bradley arrived from division headquarters within 2 hours, his helicopter touching down in a sandstorm that was finally beginning to clear. May sat at one end of the table. Her worn tool bag rested at her feet. The thumb drive lay in the center of the table like an accusation. Bradley was 52, silver hair, eyes that had seen too many wars. He looked at May with recognition that went deeper than a simple briefing. Chief Warrant Officer Carter, he said formally, it's been a long time. May straightened in her chair. Colonel Bradley, I didn't know you were still on active duty. I could say the same about you, Bradley replied. Although technically, you've been retired for 15 years. Involuntarily retired, May corrected. Bradley nodded slowly. Yes, involuntarily. After Black Widow Squadron was eliminated during a classified operation that I'm now beginning to think was less operation and more assassination. The room went very quiet. Stevens cleared his throat. Sir, Chief Carter has provided evidence suggesting that the supply chain corruption Black Widow Squadron was investigating 15 years ago is still active. The counterfeit parts we've intercepted in today's convoy match patterns from the original investigation. Bradley listened as Stevens, Brooks, and Harrison presented their findings. The counterfeit sensors, the sabotaged components, the distribution centers, the pattern of failures across multiple bases. When they finished, Bradley turned to May. Chief Carter, I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. May took a breath, then she began. In 2010, Black Widow Squadron was deployed to Afghanistan. We were a specialized unit, small, elite. Our primary mission was emergency combat repairs and tactical aviation support, but we were also good at noticing things, patterns, irregularities. She described how they'd first noticed the counterfeit parts, a fuel pump that failed during a routine mission, an oxygen sensor that registered false readings. Small things at first, easy to dismiss as normal wear and tear. But we started documenting everything, May continued. Failure rates, part numbers, manufacturers, and we realized the failures weren't random. They were concentrated in specific units, specific helicopters, specific installations. You suspected sabotage, Bradley said. We suspected corruption, May corrected. Someone was substituting genuine Boeing parts with cheaper counterfeits, pocketing the difference. We estimated the scheme involved tens of millions of dollars. Kyle, who'd been invited to sit in on the briefing, spoke up. But counterfeiting military parts is more than just fraud. It's putting soldiers at risk. Exactly, May said. Which is why we escalated our investigation. We started tracking the supply chain backward, from the forward operating bases to the main supply depots, from the depots to the distribution centers, from the distribution centers to the manufacturers. What did you find? Bradley asked. May pulled out a folder from her tool bag. It was old, weathered, but carefully preserved. We found that the counterfeit parts were being inserted at 3 specific distribution centers, she said, all operated by the same contracting company, all with the same logistics oversight, all certified through the same procurement officials. She spread photographs across the table, documents, shipping manifests, financial records. Black Widow Squadron documented everything, May said. We had enough evidence to prosecute, to shut down the entire network, to identify everyone involved. So what happened? Wright asked. May's hands trembled as she answered. We reported our findings up the chain of command. We were told the investigation would be handled by appropriate authorities. We were ordered to cease our independent inquiry and return to regular duties. But you didn't stop, Bradley said. We couldn't, May replied, because soldiers were dying, not in combat, but because they were flying helicopters with faulty parts, fighting in vehicles with compromised components, trusting equipment that had been deliberately sabotaged for profit. She described the weeks that followed, the growing sense that something was wrong, the way their reports seemed to disappear, the reassignments that pulled squadron members away one by one, the orders that seemed designed to scatter them. 3 weeks after we submitted our final report, May said, Black Widow Squadron's forward base was attacked. It was supposed to look like a coordinated enemy assault, but it wasn't. The attack was too precise, too targeted. They knew exactly where our operations center was, where we stored our evidence, where each of us would be during shift change. The room was absolutely silent. I survived because I was off base, May continued. A supply run that should have taken 2 hours took 6 because of vehicle problems. Problems that I now realize were probably sabotaged to keep me away. When I returned, the base was gone. My squad mates were dead, and all our evidence had been destroyed. Bradley's expression was carved from granite. What did you do? I did what any soldier would do, May said. I reported to command. I told them what had happened. I explained about the investigation. I requested that it be continued. And Stevens asked. And I was told that Black Widow Squadron's investigation had been concluded, that our findings had been reviewed and found to be insufficient, that pursuing accusations against military procurement officers without concrete evidence would damage unit cohesion and trust. They covered it up, Kyle said, anger evident in his voice. They classified it, May corrected, which is functionally the same thing. My squad mates' deaths were attributed to enemy action. The investigation was buried, and I was strongly encouraged to accept medical retirement for my injuries and PTSD. But you made copies of the evidence, Brooks said. May nodded. Black Widow Squadron protocols. We each carried redundant evidence packages, encrypted, hidden, designed to survive even if we didn't. I kept mine, waited, watched, and tried to stay alive. Bradley leaned back in his chair. How many attempts on your life? 5, May said. Over the first 3 years. After that, I think they assumed I'd gotten the message, that I wouldn't talk, that I'd just disappear into civilian life and carry my secrets to the grave. But you didn't disappear, Stevens said. I did, May corrected. I disappeared completely, changed my appearance, moved frequently, took contract work that kept me mobile. I became a ghost, the widow who haunted the edges of the military world but never quite left it. Harrison spoke up. That's why I called you, Chief. When this engine problem came up and I saw the symptoms, I recognized the pattern. I remembered the rumors about Black Widow Squadron, about a pilot who had survived when everyone else died, about evidence that had never been revealed. "You knew who I was?" May asked. "I suspected," Harrison said. "I served in Afghanistan in 2010. I heard the stories about a squadron that had gotten too close to something dangerous, about an attack that was too convenient, about a lone survivor who disappeared." Bradley stood and walked to the window overlooking the flight line. The Apache sat in neat rows, powerful, deadly, potentially compromised. "Chief Carter," he said without turning around, "the evidence you've provided is explosive. It implicates dozens of officers, contractors, officials. Some of them are probably still active, still in positions of authority, still profiting from corruption that puts American lives at risk." "Yes, sir," May said. "If we pursue this investigation, it will cause chaos," Bradley continued. "Careers will be destroyed, reputations ruined. Some of the people involved might claim they were just following orders, that they didn't know the parts were counterfeit." "Some of them might be telling the truth," May agreed. Bradley turned to face her. "And some of them will be lying. Some of them killed your squad mates, tried to kill you, and have spent 15 years covering up their crimes." "Yes, sir," May said. Bradley's next words would define what happened next. "Then we pursue this investigation with everything we have. We follow the evidence wherever it leads. We expose everyone involved. And we make sure Black Widow Squadron's sacrifice wasn't in vain." May felt something break inside her chest. 15 years of waiting, of hiding, of carrying evidence that no one wanted to see. It was finally over. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. But Bradley wasn't finished. "However, Chief Carter, there's a complication. The people involved in this conspiracy have had 15 years to consolidate power, to cover their tracks, to prepare defenses. If they learn that you're still alive and talking, they'll try to silence you again, permanently." "I understand the risk, sir," May said. "I don't think you do," Bradley replied. He gestured to the tactical display. 45 minutes ago, Fob Thunder was attacked, not by enemy insurgents, by a coordinated strike using military-grade weapons and tactics. The attackers knew our defensive positions, our patrol schedules, our response protocols, and they specifically targeted the hangar where you were working." May felt ice in her stomach. "They know I'm here." "They know someone is here who knows too much," Bradley corrected. "The attack was designed to look like a standard insurgent probe, but the intelligence we've gathered suggests it was actually an assassination attempt. They're trying to eliminate you before you can testify." Stevens pulled up security footage from the attack. May watched as attackers with professional military bearing moved through coordinated assault patterns. This wasn't insurgent action. This was professional, practiced, deadly. "How many attackers did we capture?" May asked. 3, Stevens said. "All dead. Suicide pills before we could question them, but we recovered their equipment. And that's where things get interesting." He displayed photographs of the captured weapons. "These are U.S. military issue, recent manufacture, part numbers trace back to, let me guess." He looked at May. "The same distribution centers," May finished. "Exactly," Stevens confirmed. "The people who have been supplying counterfeit Apache parts have also been supplying weapons to the people trying to kill you." The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear. This wasn't just about fraud. It was about a network that stretched across continents. That involved military personnel, contractors, foreign operatives, and who knew who else. "Colonel Bradley," May said carefully, "if I testify, I become a target. If I don't testify, the corruption continues and more soldiers die. So the question isn't whether I'm willing to take the risk. The question is how we protect the evidence and ensure it gets to people who can act on it." Bradley nodded. "That's exactly the right question, and I have a proposal." He pulled up a classified document on the secure terminal. Black Widow Squadron was officially disbanded 15 years ago, But what if it wasn't? What if there was a contingency plan to reactivate the unit if the original investigation ever needed to be resumed? May stared at the document, at the authorization codes, at the signatures from people high enough in the chain of command to make it happen. "You want to reactivate Black Widow Squadron," she said slowly. "I want to give you the authority and resources to finish what your squadron started," Bradley corrected. "Full investigation powers, access to classified information, protection, and most importantly, the legal standing to pursue this corruption all the way to its source." Kyle spoke up. "Sir, Chief Carter would need a team, support personnel, people she can trust." "She already has a team," Bradley said, gesturing around the table. "Everyone in this room has now been read into a classified operation. You've seen the evidence. You understand the threat. And you've already proven you're willing to work with Chief Carter regardless of regulations." Wright looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I'm not sure I'm qualified for counterintelligence work." "You're qualified to follow the evidence," Bradley said, "to document procedures, to ensure everything we do can withstand legal scrutiny. That's exactly what this investigation needs." Park raised his hand. "Sir, if Black Widow Squadron is being reactivated, does that mean Chief Carter would be returning to active duty?" Bradley smiled. It was grim, but real. Chief Warrant Officer Carter never should have been forced into retirement. If she agrees, she'll be reinstated with full rank and command of the investigation. May looked around the table, at the soldiers who had doubted her hours earlier, at the officers who were now offering her a chance to finish what her squadron had started. "Sir," she said to Bradley, "I have one condition." "What's that?" Bradley asked. May's answer was simple, absolute, non-negotiable. "We get all of them, everyone involved, from the lowest level contractor to the highest ranking officer. We don't stop until we've exposed the entire network. And we don't make deals. No plea bargains for cooperation. No reduced sentences for testimony. They killed my squad mates. They tried to kill me. They've endangered countless soldiers for 15 years. They answer for all of it." Bradley considered for a moment, then nodded, agreed. May stood straight, strong, the Chief Warrant Officer she'd been 15 years ago. "Then Black Widow Squadron is operational again, sir. And this time, we're finishing the mission." The room erupted in activity. Orders were given. Teams were assembled. The thumb drive was secured in multiple encrypted copies. Protection details were established. And May Carter transformed from dismissed civilian contractor to commanding officer of an investigation that would shake the military establishment to its foundation. But as she watched the preparations, May thought about her squad mates, about the people who had died 15 years ago, about the price of standing up to corruption, about what it cost to be the one who survived. Sometimes strength isn't about physical power or combat prowess. Sometimes it's about enduring, about carrying impossible burdens for impossible lengths of time, about refusing to let the people who silenced you have the last word. May picked up her tool bag, the same worn, duct-taped bag that had carried her evidence for 15 years. She was finally going to use it for what it was always meant to be. A weapon against the people who thought they were untouchable. Real warriors serve twice, in war then in peace, but some wars never end. They just change battlefields.